Hi, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Evanston Bound Tour series, brought to you by Artist Book House. Each week we get to talk to some amazing book artists and writers, letterpress printers, and paper makers. It's such a good time. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Evanston Bound Tour, brought to you by Artist Book House. We're so excited to have everyone here. Before we get started with our guest today, Maria Burke, we have some sad news. One of our board members and beloved friends, Suzanne Cohen-Lang, passed away this week. Anyone who went through the program at Columbia College Chicago in the Inner Arts Book and Paper MFA or MA program knew and loved Suzanne. She was there for a long time, and then she was on our board after she retired. And unfortunately, she passed away from a long battle with cancer on Tuesday morning. So we're all grieving the love of Suzanne and her life. May her memory be a blessing. Okay, so Maria Burke has been called an entropy fighter and a professional Googler. In other words, she works as a librarian, which means, depending on who you ask, is either someone who has integrity and pluck and has read a great many books in the hope of repairing the world. I like that definition. Or a hideous creature of an unimaginable power, which is also, I agree with this next sentiment, perhaps both. So she has two roles at the Milwaukee Public Library as the Rare Books Librarian and the Fine Arts Librarian. So she actually has 3 degrees, a Bachelor of Arts in English and an MFA in the Book and Paper Arts from Columbia and an MLIS. And Maria, you were going to mention where you got your MLIS from. Can you just jump in real quick?
I got my MLIS from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
All right. Thank you for throwing that in there. And then each degree was interdisciplinary, drawing connections between an assortment of subjects, fitting a desire to connect with a variety of people and ideas. And then that she has some hands-on work, primarily in museums, libraries, and archives. Smithsonian, fantastic, National Archives, the Newberry Library here in Chicago, Art Institute of Chicago, Milwaukee Art Museum, and the Milwaukee Public Museum. I think I'm going to skip the last paragraph, because of course we can talk about how awesome it is to be a librarian working in a public library setting and having all of the things at your fingertips. But I want to start with, how did you come to the book arts in general? And by book arts, I'm encompassing it with everything from making a book to reading a book to writing to librarianship. So how did you come to that?
Certainly.
Book
just about everyone here, I would say I, was an avid reader as a kid. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for me to do an undergrad in English. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people in librarianship have degrees in the humanities. Not everyone, of course, but it's very common, and English or history, especially.
Yeah. So where did you get your undergrad?
A small liberal arts school called, it was then Carroll College and is now Carroll University in Waukesha, Wisconsin. So
Waukesha. Okay. And then did you immediately start looking for grad programs, or what happened after you graduated?
I was one of those people who had always wanted to go to college. Like from a little kid, I was like, oh, I can't wait to go to college.
Right.
At some point I knew I wanted to go to grad school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted grad school for.
Right. So you couldn't define it at that point.
No. So my undergrad was like real clear, real obvious to me, but beyond that was not. But at some point I picked up a book on how to make books.
Oh, okay.
And I was real lucky in working in graphic design at a small print shop where we could get some paper samples and they would let us take some home. and I got to use these fantastic papers, commercial made at that point,
Sure.
uh, to go through and do hand bookbinding. And they were, kind of rudimentary at the time, but I had a lot of fun with it. And go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to ask what the book was, if you remember what the book was that you fell
I
upon.
think it's called Making Books by Hand.
Yeah, yeah, with the black and white spine.
This one
Is
was
it?
more of a green cover.
Okay, okay, go ahead, go ahead.
I,
There
I
are
can't.
probably 1,000 books that are called
Yes.
Making Books by Hand. All right,
Right.
go ahead. So you
Right.
started to make books,
And
and then what
then
happened?
there was a workshop at UWM, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, with Max Yala, who is the special collections librarian there. Really fantastic guy. He hosted Bill Drendel in leading a bookmaking workshop.
Oh, how great.
And for
Okay.
those who don't know, Bill Drendel at the time ran the book and paper arts section of the interdisciplinary arts department at Columbia College in Chicago.
Yeah.
And
When
Bill,
was this? This would have been, I think, Marilyn was the director until 2001,
okay,
and then Bill came in.
so
I
this would
think
have been
that's right.
maybe 2002.
Okay, that makes
2001.
sense. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Um, so Bill talked like not only did he teach us bookbinding techniques in this workshop, he told us about the program in Chicago. And I was like, you can do a grad program in bookmaking? Sign me up. Um, and so I applied and got accepted and started in 2003. Some of the works that I did while I was at Columbia. And it was a very small program. So within the interdisciplinary arts program, there were a couple of sections. At least one was video focused, I think.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
media arts.
okay, yes. There might have been a more general one.
Yeah, people could do an MA or MFA
That's
in
right.
interdisciplinary arts, and then the foci, I don't know, which would be which would be appropriate. You could do media arts, you could do book and paper arts, you could do just kind of a blanket interdisciplinary performance based one. I believe, I don't know if the MFA had a I think the only MFA was media arts and book arts, I think. But the MA, you could do like a performance based one, and sound based one, and that sort of thing. But let's actually go back to the previous slide, if you wouldn't mind. Can you tell us what this image is of you with this thing around your neck?
Yes. So the book and paper program was a 3-year intense hands-on program that involved bookbinding, hand paper making, and letterpress printing primarily. There were other aspects as well, including performance. And the image on the left is from my grad thesis, which involved creating a room as well as a number of books, all handmade, and it was all wearable books. So
Yeah.
you can't tell, but the corset there actually has um, uh, pages on the inside. So you can open it up and there's sheets of paper uh,
Oh wow. I
that
I think I and then your
and then
next.
a ruff on top, which is all handmade paper and bound together.
Yeah, I love that. And then the middle image is pulp painting.
Yes, the middle image is handmade paper pulp painting, very abstract tree. Um,
And yeah, and the one, how big is that in real life?
It's very large. It's maybe 1.5 feet wide and about 4 feet tall, I think.
That's
Maybe three.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then on the right, are you binding newspapers?
Binding newspapers, and instead of sewing around tapes, I was sewing around hammers.
Oh, clever. Okay. That's fantastic. Okay, now I will allow you to go to the next page in
Yes,
your
and this
slideshow
will come up later with sort of using weird things to do binding.
to do binding. So, I just said your next page of your slideshow, which of course is indicative of where my brain goes first.
Right,
Because this is
right.
we're on a computer. This is a slideshow. This isn't a book, but it kind of is. Okay, so what is this picture? This is you with your group.
So this is our entire group. So the program was very small, and our group had 9 people in it,
Mhm.
and then we have additionally Audrey Niffenegger, who was teaching us, and we're all looking very very casual,
Yes, very happy to be together. I love
very
this picture.
happy to be in the program.
I am enjoying this picture particularly because of all the people that I know and remember, but I haven't seen for a long time. So this is great. Thank you for sharing that.
And of course, Marty Sears has already done a Tour video with some of her fantastic work.
Yes, and you can find that on our YouTube channel. Those of you who are new to our Tours, it's Artist Bookhouse YouTube channel, or on our website, which is artistsbookhouse.org. And the artists is plural, not possessive. Okay, plugging that a little bit. Okay, so yeah, are you still in touch with your group?
Mostly on Facebook, so very casually.
Yeah, of course, of course.
I never keep in touch with people as well as I should. It's
Yes, I feel like we're all like that
yeah.
in the same situation. All right, fantastic.
And
Thank you.
so I after graduating from Columbia, one of the things I did while I was at Columbia was I took an internship in the library at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yes, the Ryerson
Fantastic.
Library.
Really, really excellent, and learned a lot of preservation techniques, and just got to work with books in a different way than I was within the program itself.
Right. Was this when Barb Corbell was still there?
Yes, Barb
Yes.
Corbell.
Great. Fantastic.
Yes. And so after I graduated, I moved back to Milwaukee, where I had been living before and I'm living now. And I ended up volunteering at the Milwaukee Art Museum Library.
Oh,
And
fun.
so that was a nice connection. And it really sort of opened a different door for me. When I was volunteering there every day after I was done, I just was like really happy and enjoyed my experience so much. And I asked the librarian archivist there, Heather Winter, what I would need to do to sort of get a job like that. And she
Yeah.
said, I hate to tell you this, but you need another master's degree.
Oh, no.
Yes. So I went home and I told my husband, I think I want to go back to school again.
What did
And
he say to that?
he was very supportive, but said, okay, but if you're going to do that, you're not taking on any more debt.
Right. Let's figure out how to pay for it or how to have somebody else pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I was at Columbia, I was going to school full time and occasionally working part time.
Right.
And when I then went to library school at UWM, it was the other way around. I was working full time and going to school part time.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
that allowed me to not take on any additional student loans.
That's great. Fantastic. Okay. What was oh, there we go. Oh,
Yes.
you know what? I think it froze on, there we are. Okay. I'm looking at two screens. So
Uh,
yes. So what is this was what you made?
so one of the things I did in school was create this poster as part of a preservation class. And this was based on some commercials that were very popular at the time. So
Yeah.
what it takes to keep our materials preserved in different
Right.
and why we should do it because
Right.
preserving our cultural heritage is how we connect to our memory, our
Oh,
past, um, people from other time periods, and other folks around us.
right. And our ancestral heritage as
Exactly.
well. I love this.
Exactly.
So I hope you got an A in that class.
Probably.
Probably. Okay. And then what happens?
Um, so after graduating, I was sort of thinking about books. Got a job in a library, and one of the things I came up with was this idea of, uh, or an acronym based on the idea of what first draws your attention to a book.
Yeah.
And it might be the cover. There's something really intriguing that you see on there that makes you want to grab it and open it and find out more. It might be the author or the artist. There's some authors that we want to read everything they've written.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you love a certain author. It doesn't matter what they write. You're going to check it out. You're going to find
Right.
out.
Right.
Sometimes you grab a book because you read a review that was just very intriguing, or it was recommended to you by a friend whose taste you feel jives with yours, and you want to find out why they loved it, and so you take a look further. Um, Sometimes a title is just super intriguing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one I like to think about is called "The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake."
Oh, yes, and I love that book.
Yes.
I love that title, and you're right, I was drawn into the title and the cover. It's got this gorgeous cake
Mhm.
painting on it, and the book is just stunning.
And
Yes.
and that title just makes you wanna know more. Like, what
Like
is sad about lemon cake? And what is
right, and
particularly sad about
right, right, and yes, what is the particularity of the sadness? What does
right,
that mean? And, of course, the book answers that question in a roundabout way. I
right.
love that. Yes, you're right. Okay, and then subject?
And then, obviously, most people, grab books based on their subject. What is it
Right,
about? What's the topic? What do you wanna know more on? Um,
right, right, and I love that your acronym is CARTS because, of
Arts.
course, carts are what we put books on and roll around the libraries.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay.
And eventually I got a job at the public library, the Central Public Library downtown in Milwaukee. But before that, and I don't have any pictures of it, I was working in the archives of the Harley Davidson Museum.
I
And
love that. I just love that.
we've got a couple people here from the museum. So
That's great.
Lily's still there, Amy was there. Um,
And
and
what were some of the materials that you were working on there? Because I can't imagine what they have actually.
they have, it wasn't the area I worked on, but one of the things they have is these huge movable stacks, not of books, but of motorcycles.
Oh my gosh.
So they have this fantastic collection of motorcycles on these giant, like in this big warehouse type space. And you can, like in a large library, press a button to have the shelves move and
Yeah, that's
lift you
great.
up to get to the highest level and take a look.
That's so
Uh,
great.
yeah. But what I worked on, they have uh, software that does cataloging for all of the materials that are kept in the archives. And while there is some paper materials, it's a lot of other stuff as well. So,
Yeah.
they have leather jackets and paintings and glasses and uh, just about anything you can think of that would be Harley branded.
That is cool.
There's
And then
probably
you moved over to the rare book room at were you working in the archives at the Milwaukee Public Library at all? Or are you tell us about this slide and this
sure.
job. Yeah.
So so then I moved to the Milwaukee Art Museum, or I'm sorry, the
Oh, okay.
Milwaukee
Gotcha.
Public Library,
Gotcha. Okay.
and it became part of the art department. And then I became the Fine Arts Librarian. And then after the previous Rare Books Librarian left, I became the new Rare Books Librarian.
Awesome. So both jobs still or just rare books librarian?
Both jobs still.
And what does that entail for your day to day in normal times?
So in normal times, both of these are sort of the collection focus that I pay attention to.
Yeah.
Well, was still spending much of the day on the reference desk and doing reference interactions with patrons. My collection focus would be something like buying all the books for the fine arts area at the Central
Yeah.
Library,
Yeah. Yeah. And
which
then for the rare book side, do you have an artist book collection there? Do you
it
have just
is. Yes.
wow, are you
Lots
building
of
that?
artist
Are
books
you able to be the one building the collection?
Theoretically, yes. The sad part is, that we don't have money in the budget for it.
Right, of course.
And part of that is a very, understandable reason, that
Of
we don't
course.
wanna use, public funds to purchase materials that are, locked away in a more secure way that
Right.
limits access to people.
Right.
So then all of the books in the Rare Books collection are donations, or were moved from our regular collection into Rare Books over time.
Yeah, yeah, just based on the disintegration and the fact that you wanna save them.
Exactly.
Um, so what is in that collection? What kinds of books do people donate? And how do you discern if someone's bringing a book in and says, "I want you to have this," do you accept everything that they're donating for the rare book room? Or is
Uh,
it kind of
so
like you have
far,
to curate?
so far, everything that people have donated has been wonderfully fitting with our collection.
Oh, that's great.
The most recent things we've gotten are zines. We have a
Yeah,
zine collection, and people have been incredibly generous about donating their zines to us,
I love that.
which is just I'm really grateful for. And more recently, we also got the donation of an artist book that was a gift for to remember a previous Rare Books librarian who passed a couple of years ago. And the
Okay,
book was
lovely.
donated by her, one of her book clubs that she belonged to. So it
Oh, I love
was a very
that.
sweet donation.
That is very sweet. All right. And so during pandemic times, what is your day to day like?
So, like many other people, our library closed down in March, and all the librarians and all the other staff were working from home, or at some point deployed to the Milwaukee Health Department to help out there with their great
Right.
need. And
Right.
now that all of the branches in the central library have opened back up to the public, there's still a limited service model. And so special collections are all closed off still.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Uh,
you're mostly just working reference
yeah,
and reader services probably.
exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you for showing us this beautiful room and the place in which you work. Where is the Milwaukee Public Library located? The main branch?
It is located downtown Milwaukee on 8th and Wisconsin.
Okay.
And it is a fantastic building. Was built in 1898. And in non-pandemic times, I get to give tours of the building and show
Oh.
off the fantastic details of the architecture, like the tile floor and the layers of molding, and going up into the dome itself.
Oh, fun.
Such a fabulous space. So
Oh, that's fun. I love that.
yeah,
Okay, are we on our next slide? I know we have to get to the very important um,
yes.
zine conversation as well. So this is what are you showing us here?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've been able to work with in Milwaukee is the Milwaukee Zine Fest. And I've been able to do a couple workshops during the event about bookbinding and binding specifically for zine makers. And which often is very sort of work with the materials you have and don't worry too much about perfection, but really exploring different things in front of you rather than trying to be, it's kind of the opposite of fine art, fine binding.
Right, and the opposite of archival as well.
Often, yes.
Yeah, I love that. And so how many zine fests have you worked with at the binding workshop?
I've done workshops at two different zine fests, I believe.
Fantastic. And what happened to the zine fest this year? When does it usually happen, and is it happening, and did it
It was
trans
originally scheduled for April,
sure.
and unfortunately, it had to be canceled for this year, and
Yeah.
hope we'll be able to do it again next year, or figure out some other alternative in the meantime until we can all
Yeah.
sit together in person.
Yeah. It's kind of a hard thing to do online, I would think, too. Um, I love this, and that's a peanut noodle bowl cover. What is
Yes.
the bottom right? What's inside that? It looks like something plastic.
Yeah, so, if you've ever seen these Annie Chun's noodle bowls, they come like the noodles are in one bag, the toppings are in another bag, the sauce is in a different bag, and you empty all the bags into the bowl, and you cook them in the microwave.
Yeah.
And what I've done here is I've bound them all together, all the bags, after the food itself is eaten.
So the bags are the pages. I love that.
Yes, yes.
That's so great.
I mean, you can see the oil, the peanut oil has seeped into the cover. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It is not archival at
Not
all.
at all archival. What is this? The bottom middle, it looks like it has rubber bands along the binding.
Oh, it does look like rubber bands.
What is
Those are
that?
actually toothpicks, the sort of fancy toothpicks you might get in
Oh,
a cocktail.
oh, that's so cool. And they're
Yeah,
just basically like the skewer binding where you do the opposite and then in and out and weaving sort of.
exactly. The
I
piano
don't remember
skewer
the name of it,
binding.
but yeah,
Yeah,
that's so cool. And
yeah.
this
And
is
so that's
tea
all,
bag.
yes.
It's tea.
Tea.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was so focused on those as rubber bands, and I didn't pay attention to the little that these are the things that tea comes in. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so great. Thank you
And
for
then
sharing this.
left of that, another piano hinge binding.
Piano hinge.
Yeah,
Thank you.
with pencils and cards, scrap cards that we have around the library.
Okay. I love this. Thank you for showing this. And it is true. We need to use whatever materials at hand, especially right now in the middle of a pandemic. We don't often have time or energy or whatever to go buy fancy pants materials. And if we don't already have it, look in your recycle bin and find the um, cereal box.
Right, right.
I love that.
Yeah,
All
the
right.
one in the upper left-hand corner is a file folder.
Oh, that's great. And that looks like it's just a pamphlet stitch.
Just a pamphlet stitch.
I
Yeah,
love this. Thank
yeah.
you for sharing this. And so the workshops at the Zine Fest, people were really appreciative, I'm sure, figuring out how to make make different zines out and bind them. I love
Yes.
that. What a
And
wonderful thing.
because we have a zine collection in the in the Rare Books room, um, for previous zine fests, I've been able to create displays of different zines that we have in the collection. And one of the things I like doing with the display is showing off the different binding styles that people come up with, because
Yeah, I
there's a
love that.
huge range of creativity of just the physical formats that people make,
That is
in
so
addition
great.
to the content that they have, which is on just about any topic.
That is so great. Now, so the focus, of course, you have donations and books coming in that way. And are you focusing on curating that zine collection and building it up so that your rare books room is sort of known for the zines, or are you sort of all across the board on what you're collecting in that, artist books, zines, rare books that people bring you? Is it kind of just, I mean, I guess my question is, how focused is your curation tactic? I guess.
It's it's pretty broad,
Yeah, yeah,
like
I
kind of
love that.
all across the board. There
I
are
love.
18,000 items in there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's huge. And one of the things that's really special about it is that it is really unusual for a public library to have a
Yeah.
rare books collection.
Yeah, it is unusual, and I love that you do that. It's
Yeah,
so great.
especially for being a city that's on the smaller side. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that New York has one or Boston has one, but Milwaukee is much smaller than the other public libraries that have their own rare books
Collections.
collections. So
Yeah, I
we're
love that.
very fortunate.
In the future, once we do have a brick and mortar space for Artist Book House, I want to connect with you about having an exhibition,
Yeah,
in our space. That would be fantastic.
that would be
But that's we don't need to talk about that during your tour. Do you want to? I think you have two more slides, right?
just a couple of some of the bindings that we did at Zine Fest for a couple workshops. Um, so, here it's a lot of binding with sewing or using some other materials and to create a spine. And then workshops that are just uh, folding, cutting, taping one piece of paper.
Yeah, which is fantastic because you can take that to a photocopier and do an edition and spread it all around the world for that.
Exactly.
I love this.
So it's one piece of paper, you make one cut in a particular way, you fold it up in a particular way, and you get this fabulous little 8-page book.
I love that. And this is one that we use a lot with kids to teach them
Yes,
how to make them their own books
yes.
as well. And then the next one, you have this very fancy,
And
colorful awesomeness.
yeah, this I really love. It is a Tetraflexagon, where a single sheet of paper, in this case printed on both sides, is folded, cut, and taped back together in such a way that it also creates multiple pages of the book
I love that.
in
And
a
then
way that,
people could design whatever content they wanted to put on these sections too.
yes.
That's
But if
so
you
great.
see, like, the final book there, it's set up to be like a rainbow
Yeah.
once it's all in order. But on the left is where it starts. So it looks like a random hodgepodge of
Yeah. But
colored.
it's right. Go ahead. Dependent on how you fold it, right?
Right, right.
And cut.
So you have to be very particular in how you do the layout and design of the pages. Otherwise, it will not work correctly.
I love that.
And
That's so great. Thank you for sharing those.
yes, you're
And
welcome.
before you and I were talking about how you have the PDFs of those and we can share those out,
Yes,
to our Facebook group and eventually on our website for people to use. I
Yeah,
love that.
I tried putting them in the chat here, but there were some technical issues, so
Yeah, we
we'll
couldn't get
probably
it to
won't
work.
get those out to anyone later.
So I wanted to actually ask you also, because you are a reader and a rare book collector, artist book librarian person, um, what advice would you give the layperson on building a collection both of just books to read and building a collection of artist books and rare books, or like the idea of having not rare books but like an artist book collection or a special book collection, I guess could be what you would call it. So what advice would you give to just random people who want to do this, who want to have their own private collection of, I mean, because clearly you have loads of books behind you. I have loads of books behind me. We both have our fiction and nonfiction collections. So, um, can you sort of touch on that a little bit as a professional
Sure.
person who
Yeah,
has multiple degrees and has done this for a long, long time?
yeah, it absolutely depends on the context and what you're trying to do. So, for instance, in fine arts that I collect at the library, Um, one of the things that I'm very interested in is collecting a broad range of materials that a regular person will want to check out. We're not an
Okay.
academic library, so I try not to have things that are very obscure, detailed, academically oriented.
Uh-huh.
And uh, I'm really trying to get a broad range of things. And so I look at what was collected in the past and fill in gaps of things that maybe we didn't have. So there weren't always books on, for instance, video art. So I'm going to
Oh,
collect
okay.
more books on video art as more of those are being published.
Yeah, yeah,
And um, you know, art history has a very white male European focus.
sure.
So as much as I love Monet, we have enough books on Monet. So
Right.
let's get some women in there, some people of color in there, some queer folks in there, as well as the different media of art that that is beyond European style paintings.
Right, right. I love that. And then for the rare book room, what are you looking for? I mean, you said that you're accepting donations and you don't have, but if you had unlimited funds,
Right, right.
what would you be use what how would you curate that
We
collection?
have sort of different, well, it's a very broad collection. We have different focuses. So, absolutely anything related to the history of Milwaukee,
Yeah.
that would be considered rare or unusual. About Wisconsin, or about some of the things we're already collecting. So, Native Americans, Birds of America, um, artist books, certainly, things in those realms.
Oh,
We
that's
will.
fantastic. And then for your own personal library at home, what do you read the most for
Ah,
your own pleasure?
so I have always followed the quote, there are books you want to read and books you want to have read. But
Ah,
also books you want to own.
of
And,
course.
and of course, those overlap some, but not exclusively. So, obviously, working at a library, it's not a surprise that I check out many library books that I then return and never need to own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And for me, my personal collection is about format more than content.
Okay.
So
Tell us more.
I'm really interested in the space we're in right now where books are becoming um, fine objects and objects of curious interest that is beyond simply the content of them.
Oh, I love
As
that.
Yeah, as we move towards digital books, which are really, really a lot about text on a page, which is great, but that takes away from the tactile experience. And
Yeah.
so the books that I want to have at my fingertips are books where touching them, turning the pages, the way you read them is really something different than you could do in any other medium.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And back to the question, what do you like to read, fiction wise and nonfiction wise? What are your favorite authors and such?
So right now I'm reading a novel by N.K. Jemisin
Mhm.
called The City We Became, uh,
Yeah.
which is this really intriguing idea of the city of New York suddenly becoming a sentient being.
Yeah. And there's people inside and then people outside. I read about it and it's on my list. I haven't read it yet, so it's good so far.
Yes, yes, I'm still at the beginning of it, but I like fantasy novels in part because our world is not what most of us want it to be, and so
Right.
diving
Right.
into something that is sometimes a little escapist can be very nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I should say this book is urban fantasy and takes place in very current times, and so it's not as escapist as something else might be.
As something else might be. So I was having a hard time at the beginning of the shelter in place. I was just not able to focus and read at all. And I read a lot. And the book that got me out of that mindset was Station 11,
Oh,
which
I've
is
heard good things
so,
about that.
oh my gosh, it's about a pandemic, and it's about during the pandemic, and then when people 3 or 4 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, where people are dead and they're redoing their society. Um, but I was like, I don't know if I want to reread this. This might not be what I need, but I read it in like a day and a half. And I was like, okay, that opened the floodgates for me. So it was on the same lines of like escapist, but a little too real.
Right.
So, like I don't quite understand how that worked, but it did.
Sometimes it's
Um,
nice to dive into what other people have experienced and see how they've reacted to a situation.
yeah, and then
So
the
books like
yeah,
that can act as a guide for
yeah,
how you want to move through the times that we're living in.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It makes me feel 1,000 times better for having to have that be the book that got me out of my slump of non-reading for a little bit. So one of the other things that I wanted to mention or ask you about is what do you do and what do you advise patrons to do when you run out of things to read, or you just kind of like are in the middle of a pandemic and can't quite get to that hump back to the reading. And this isn't for reluctant readers of in general. This is just a question of what do you do? What do you do when a patron comes up and says, I haven't been able to read, but what should I be reading to get myself back to it? Does that make sense as a question?
Absolutely. And this is something I've discussed with other library staff early on. Sometimes a stress response means not being able to enjoy things that we used to enjoy, or not being able to enjoy them with the greater frequency. So there was I remember some discussion early on with folks saying that like what you should do during this time at home is create and develop a new skill
Right.
and make something new, which is
Productivity. Right.
fantastic advice, but that doesn't necessarily work for everybody as part of their stress experience. So
Right.
a number of these tours have been able to show artists who are really able to use that stress and fuel it to make art in a way that then helps decrease the stress that they're experiencing, which is fantastic. Um, for those that don't, it's sort of a matter of having to i- come up with something that's going to allow you to make space for yourself.
Yeah.
Reading is such a personal endeavor that sometimes it feels selfish.
Yes.
Sometimes it feels that if we're taking time for ourselves, we're not doing things for other people. Or if we're
Yes.
taking time for ourselves for pleasure, we're not doing the things that we need to do, maybe around the house or in our communities or out in the
Right.
garden.
Yeah. And then there's a guilt involved in that in some ways too.
Yes, absolutely. And so part of it is you know acknowledging that we need self-care, and if reading is one of those elements for you, it's allowing yourself sometimes the permission to read.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And that's very helpful. And I imagine your patrons find it very helpful
Mm.
too. So we have a couple things in the chat. And actually, the one of the things I believe is Nancy just retired actually from the Evanston Public Library. I
Okay.
worked with her at the North Branch for a long time. And she said, Station 11, pandemic plus Shakespeare equals freeing your mind, comfort with linked humanity. That's exactly right. And I want to recommend that book for anyone on the Tour. If you haven't read it yet, it's by Emily St. What's the last? I can't remember. And I have the book, her other book right over there because I'm waiting to read it and I can't get up and see it. But Station 11. And then Mary says Station 11 is going on my list of books to read. Thank you. Good. Yes. And it is very, very good and very I like literary fiction as well, and this definitely touches that. But it kicked off for me that getting rid of, I guess, the guilt or the sort of I was frozen, I think,
Mhm.
So let's see what else she has to say. Mary says, "This is how I get out of slumps. I keep lists of books." Oh, thank you, Kimberly Thomas said Emily St. John Mandel. I wasn't getting the last. Yes, and I have the Glass Houses, I think is her. No, that's a different book. Glass Castle? No, that's different book. I have her newer book waiting to be read, but I have many books in front of it. So, okay, back to you, Maria. So, I guess I don't have any more questions, specific questions for you, except that you had said that you crochet and knit. And how is that going for you? Is that kind of your outlet because you're not making artist books making paper anymore? Tell us about that.
So I have a thing to show you guys.
Oh, yay.
So in addition to the paper flexagon, I recently made a knitted flexagon. And so you can see that on one side it's purple, on the other side it's blue.
Oh my
uh,
gosh, I love that.
but if you fold it just the right way,
You get all of it.
um, now
Oh, it's
now
red
it's
and
red on one side and blue on the other side.
so did you make up this pattern? Did you come up with that?
I purchased a pattern that someone else had made. However, I found the instructions to be a little bit more cumbersome than I was interested in. So I sort of modified and rewrote the pattern as I was going
I
to
love that. And of course your
line up
brain
with it.
does that, right? You've had enough, structural engineering, you can just do that. I love that. So we have a couple more things. So yes, Kimberly Thomas, you are just on it. The Glass Hotel. Yes, thank you. I don't remember. I was like Glass Castle. No, that's the other one. And then Mary says that turned out great. So those are your comments from the chat. Thank
Thank
you so much, Maria. I'm so happy we got a chance to talk today.
me
I've been
too.
waiting for this one for I think we set this up like 2 months ago. I'm so excited.
Yes.
And you are actually the last in our September Tours, and I don't know if you noticed as a Tour person who comes, but we were focusing on women this month. So
Mhm.
I am appreciative of your being here, and I'm so grateful that we were able to make this happen today. Hi again. Thank you so much for watching this week's Tour. We really appreciate your support. If you want to learn more about our guest from today, please read the description below. And if you'd like to support more programming like this coming from Artist Book House, please visit our website at artistbookhouse.org/donate. Thank you again for joining us.